Peace of the Lord be with you. And we are now around the season of the Christmas. And we are on the last Sunday of the Advent of this year. So we are going to think about the Christmas and what it is like to have Christmas this year. And today's scripture is from Matthew's Gospel and from Luke's Gospel. First, Matthew Gospel, chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he became enraged. He sent men to kill all the children in Bethlehem and throughout the surrounding region from the age of 2 and under, according to the time he had learned from the wise men. And then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud wailing, Rachel weeping for her children, and she did not want to be comforted because they were gone. And second, in Luke's Gospel, chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. Now in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus to register all the empire for taxes. This was the first registration, taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone went to his own town to be registered. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family line of David. He went to be registered with Mary, who was promised in marriage to him, and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in the stripes of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. We just read the two Christmas stories in Matthew's Gospel and Luke's Gospel, and we are going to think about what the first Christmas was like and what we can learn from those stories, and what I can think about reading these scriptures. Reading Luke's Gospel and Matthew's Gospel in Christmas stories, we can find two kinds of people who heard the news about the birth of Messiah. So let's first look at the Luke's Gospel. Luke reports that there was no room for the family, that they laid the baby in a manger. And we normally think that Jesus' family was so poor and so miserable because there was no room for the newborn baby, so they laid the baby in a manger. Just thinking of that, it seems very terrible. But, well, it is not actually. We should not think that the Holy Family were cast out of the comfortable inn and then they had to stay in a barn. Well, it is not true, actually, because the structure of the house of the ancient Near East Asia, like Palestine, is actually different from that of the the house of modern times. Modern barns are normally away from the house where people live. But 2,000 years ago in the Near East and Asia, at the time, it was not so. The animals and people lived together in a house. That means the animals and people stayed under the same roof. People stayed in the upper part of the house, upper floor. It's a little bit higher than the lower floor. So, the people stayed on the higher level, and animals lived in a lower level, lower part of the house. And people put a manger on the edge of the upper level, so that the animals could approach and feed themselves. So that's how they lived in a house. Now Bethlehem at the time was very crowded because of the census. Bethlehem is a very small town. So it was almost impossible to have a room for those who came late. And Joseph and Mary, of course, they could not travel fast because she was pregnant. So they probably came late. Mary was around the end of her pregnancy. So probably they came late. Much later than others. So it was almost impossible for them to find a room in a small town. But the kind resident of Bethlehem welcomed this family. And the host of the house yielded his room for this poor family. This family was with a pregnant wife. Actually was an unexpected guest. Just imagine that who would travel with a wife who was about to give birth? It is out of sense. But so probably the resident of the Bethlehem did not expect this kind of guest. So they could not prepare for the birth. And the manger was not a bad place for a baby to be laid, wrapped in clothes. As I told you, the manger was on the edge of upper part, which is not a bad place. It's a people's area. So Joseph and Mary stayed in a room, not in the barn of modern times. They stayed in a room and they put a baby in a manger, which was not a bad place. It means that those people in Bethlehem, they were good and kind people who welcomed Jesus' baby. Although they were poor and unlearned, they could do for the baby what they could do. Even if it did not fit for the king. Yes, it is true. It is not fit for the king. But it was enough because they welcomed him even though they were poor. They did what they could do. And let us move on to Matthew's Gospel. There are another kind of people in Matthew's Gospel who heard the news about the newborn king. Herod and the Jewish authorities, they were embarrassed when the wise men visited them to worship the newborn king. The birth of Jesus was just like that in Bethlehem, was an unexpected event. It was a surprise. But those in Jerusalem, unlike those in Bethlehem, did not welcome the baby. Rather, they plotted to kill the newborn king to keep their status quo. They did not feel guilty even when they killed all the babies under 2 years old. Their lust for their power was so strong that they did not want the coming of the Messiah, because the coming of Messiah may require them to give up what they have. Let's think about those 2 characters in Luke's Gospel and Matthew's Gospel. Those in Luke and Matthew, they were all surprised at the coming of the baby king. But the poor people in Luke's Gospel welcomed the baby, even though it was not easy for them. But in contrast, the powerful people in Matthew's Gospel refused the baby, even though they could welcome the baby. They had money, they had power, they had room, they had everything to welcome the baby, but they did not do so. People in Luke's Gospel were poor but rich in mind. But those in Matthew's Gospel, they were rich but poor in their mind. Why the high and noble people in Matthew's Gospel did not welcome baby Jesus? Why the poor people in Bethlehem welcomed Jesus? Well, the Bible does not tell us why they did like that. We do not know. But we can guess that it was because of their heart. For the people in Jerusalem, there was no room for the newborn king. But for those in Bethlehem, there was enough room for the baby to stay. That means it is not the matter of what we can do or what we have, but it is a matter of what our hearts are like. Let's come back to our days. Well, as you know, the world is not, and the situation is not that good, because of COVID-19. The economic situation, health, everything is messed up. People are losing their jobs. Everybody says it's hard to live. Yes, it is true. It's not easy to live nowadays because of the COVID-19. But we should remember, it is true, yes, it is true that we are living in hard times, but still, it is still much better than the life in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. We are much better than them. Compared with their lives in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, we are living in a heaven. We are living in a palace. It's fantastic life compared with the life 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem. That means it is not a matter of the economic situation or all the situations surrounding us. It's not a matter of that kind of situation, but the matter of our hearts. what our hearts are like. Well, if those in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago could do, why not us? Why we cannot do? We can do. We can welcome baby Jesus, even if the situation is not good. Because it's not a matter of the situation, but it's a matter of our hearts. Hearts to welcome baby Jesus. We should ask ourselves, am I ready to give up, lay down all the things, and empty my heart, and make my heart to be prepared for welcoming baby Jesus? And it is around time. We are in a season of Christmas, and we need to think about those kind people in Bethlehem in Luke's Gospel and what they did. Peace be with you, and be Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!